Then the document goes on, how does the church help Catholic faithful speak about political and social questions? We discussed the first three, now making moral choices. First, there must be outright opposition to laws and other policies that violate human life or weaken its protection. Again, this is number 5. The bishops keep repeating this over and over and over again. We have to work against those laws. We have a moral obligation to work against those laws. Prudence must be applied to some policy choices like, for instance, housing, affordable housing, or health care, or immigration, and others. Prudence here would mean seeking out the church's teachers when they apply Catholic social teaching to specific situations. And in certain areas, like I mentioned the just wage, there's a lot of room for us to kind of argue. There are other situations, however, where the prudential choice is just obvious by logic, by reason. Right? And the bishop simply apply reason and logic to a specific situation, and they say, given the certain current conditions and all the facts that before us, even though it's not an intrinsic evil, we know we should go forward with this policy. And they lay out some principles that way. And even then, there are usually some sort of prudential wiggle room there. But I don't want to give the impression that somehow prudence means everything's up in the air and we don't have to listen to the bishops. They go on, paragraph 34, and here's where things get more interesting. Catholics often face difficult choices about how to vote. This is why it is so important to vote according to a well-formed conscience that perceives the proper relationship among moral goods. A Catholic cannot vote for a candidate who takes a position in favor of an intrinsic evil, such as abortion or racism, if the voter's intent is to support that position. In such cases, a Catholic would be guilty of formal cooperation in grave evil. At the same time, a voter should not use a candidate's opposition to an intrinsic evil to justify indifference or inattentiveness to other important moral issues involving human life and dignity. So, what does all that mean? I'm a voter, I want to vote for this particular candidate, right? The candidate says, I support an intrinsic evil. Now the voter votes for that person because they say, well great, so do I. I want to vote for you. Right? That's not allowed, because that's formal cooperation with a grave evil. So to make it even clearer, a candidate is in support of the constitutional right to abortion. I say, I agree that there should be a constitutional right for abortion, and I'm voting for you because I want there to be a constitutional right for abortion. You're not allowed to do that. That's formal cooperation with evil. And remember the sentence, the paragraph also says, you can't just vote for one guy over one issue and ignore all the other ones either. You can't do that either. You have to look at a whole bunch of issues. So the bishops go on. There may be times when a Catholic who rejects a candidate's unacceptable position may decide to vote for a candidate for other morally grave reasons. Voting this way would be permissible only for truly grave moral reasons, not to advance narrow interests or partisan preferences or to ignore fundamental moral evil. So, again, we got a voter, we got a candidate, the candidate supports a moral evil, intrinsic evil. Right? One of the lists that I gave you, an intrinsic, something that's always and everywhere wrong. Okay? And the voter says, well, that stinks. Still, I really think I have to vote for you. Why? Well, because I have some truly great moral reasons. Now, what would count as truly great moral reasons? We'll get there. Right? We'll get there. The bishops talk about that in the next paragraph. But are we clear right now? So far? Okay. That's called remote material cooperation with evil, which is allowable in certain circumstances. It is allowable. So then the bishops say this. In making these decisions, which are tough decisions, it's essential for Catholics to be guided by a well-formed conscience that recognizes that all issues do not carry the same moral weight, and that moral obligation to oppose intrinsically evil acts has a special claim on our consciences and our actions. So what do the bishops mean by truly grave moral reasons? Remember, if you've done catechism before, you know what grave matter, when you're talking about mortal sin. Grave matter means really serious stuff. Right? They say only truly grave moral reasons justify voting for a candidate that encourages an intrinsic evil. So what would justify that? The bishops say, when all candidates hold a position in favor of an intrinsic evil, the conscientious voter faces a dilemma. The voter may decide to take the extraordinary step of not voting for any candidate, or, after careful deliberation, may decide to vote for the candidate deemed less likely to advance such a morally flawed position, and more likely to pursue the other authentic human good. So what if I have a voter and two candidates, right? And one candidate supports an intrinsic evil, the other one supports 5.
Yeah.
Which happens. Which happens. I'm allowed to vote for the one who supports the one intrinsic evil. Why? Because I don't want the other guy who supports 5 to be elected. That's a prudential choice. Now, again, as the bishops say, you could choose not to vote. But in that situation, you do not want to support a grave moral evil, that's fine. That's on your conscience, you figure that out. Your other choice could be, I'll vote for the guy who only supports one intrinsic evil, because the other guy is going to support 5. And that would be really bad. And I have a moral obligation to work against intrinsic evils in our society. All right, so I could say that stinks. Still, I want to vote, so I'm going to vote for the guy who supports just one intrinsic evil. And that's what I mean when the bishops talk about truly grave moral reasons. That's a truly grave moral reason. I want to stop, because I have an obligation, remember, to oppose intrinsic evils. I want to stop the advancement of this other intrinsic evil. And I'm not condoning intrinsic evil. I don't like voting for this person. I think this person's bad on a whole bunch of levels, but ultimately I think this is what's best for our society. And so long as you take that remember the bishops use the word conscientious voter. As long as you take that a vote, that's why I don't think it'd be necessarily a slippery slope. So the bishops also do talk about that we need to take into consideration whether or not A, the candidate is trustworthy, but B, whether or not the candidate can actually affect that specific issue. So the candidate might say, look, I'm going to end poverty. So everybody says, well, great, that guy's going to end poverty. Let's vote for that guy. He can't. Not one man can't possibly do it, especially in our system. So you do have to take into consideration who the candidate is, what the power situation is, if it's a presidential election, what the Congress is going to be like, is you going to get any legislation through. All those things have to be taken into consideration, yes. And that's part of the prudential discussion you have to have. That's part of being a conscientious voter. And that brings up, of course, the fact that you also have to be well informed. I mean, you have to know, right? Who's in power, who are the players, what is the history behind that particular issue, what is this guy's history in other situations, does he have a record, what's his record in other places? You want to look all that up. I just wanted to end this hour with this quote from Pope Benedict, who talks about the Eucharistic consistency. Worship pleasing to God can never be a purely private matter without consequences for our relationships with others. It demands a public witness to our faith. Evidently, this is true for all the baptized. Yet it is especially incumbent upon those who, by virtue of their social or political position, must make decisions regarding fundamental values such as respect for human life, its defense from conception to natural death, the family built on marriage upon a man and a woman, the freedom to educate one's children, and the promotion of the common good in all its forms. And this is part of the Eucharistic consistency, that we are a Eucharistic people, that we are a people founded on sacraments and grace. And what I like about this statement, which ends this section, bishops actually end their section with this quote from Pope Benedict, is that it reminds us that this is not a political game. This is a game about our spiritual lives, right? We believe in things visible and invisible. This is a matter that has to do with our spiritual lives. So we need to make sure we get to confession, we go to Mass, that we have a prayer life, we seek out counsel, both spiritual and practical, so that we can better inform ourselves and inform our conscience.